There is a building just across the river from Washington, D.C. that almost every American has seen and almost none have ever entered. It is the largest office building on Earth by floor space. It holds more than 25,000 people every single working day. And from the outside, it looks like the most boring structure ever built by a government. 5 flat limestone walls, no tower, no dome, no statue out front. Just concrete. That is the point. Because behind those plain walls is the command center of the most powerful military the world has ever known. Every order that moves an aircraft carrier, every decision that launches a satellite, every plan that sends troops to the other side of the planet, it runs through this building. And the deeper you go inside it, the stranger and more deliberate it gets. This is the Pentagon, and what is hidden inside it was designed on purpose to be hidden in plain sight. Start with the scale, because the numbers do not sound real. The building covers 29 acres of ground, the single largest ground footprint of any office building in the world. Inside are roughly 6.5 million square feet of total space. To put that in perspective, you could fit 3 Empire State Buildings inside it and still have room left over. The entire United States Capitol could drop into any one of the Pentagon's 5 wedge-shaped sections. And then there are the hallways. 17.5 miles of corridors run through this building. 17.5. That is longer than a half marathon. And yet, here is the part that almost nobody believes. You can walk between any 2 points in the entire Pentagon in about 7 minutes. A building large enough to swallow 3 skyscrapers, and you can cross it faster than your morning commute. That is not an accident. That is engineering. To understand how that is possible, you have to understand the shape. The Pentagon is built as 5 concentric rings, one inside the next, labeled A through E from the center outward. Those 5 rings are cut through by 10 corridors that run like spokes on a wheel from the inner courtyard to the outer wall. Want to get from the far side of the building to the other? You do not walk around the ring. You cut across a spoke. The geometry that looks like decoration from above is actually a movement system, designed so a 5-star general and a clerk can both get anywhere in minutes. Only one of those rings has windows to the outside world, the E ring, the outermost. And that is where the most senior officials in American defense sit, the Secretary of Defense among them. Everyone else works in the interior, in rings that look out onto nothing but other concrete walls or the 5-acre courtyard at the dead center of the building. Now here is where the story stops being about a building and starts being about a war. The Pentagon was not built slowly, the way you would expect for the largest office building on the planet. It was thrown up at a speed that should have been impossible. Construction began on September 11, 1941, months before the United States had even entered the Second World War. The War Department was scattered across 17 separate buildings around Washington, drowning in its own paperwork as the world caught fire. Secretary of War Henry Stimson told President Roosevelt the department was out of room. The answer was to build one building big enough to hold all of it. A project this size should have taken 4 years. It was finished in 16 months. To pull that off, the country threw everything at it. At the peak of construction, 15,000 workers labored in 3 shifts around the clock, with floodlights blazing over the site at night so the work never stopped. The demand for office space was so desperate that employees moved in before the building was done, working at desks in hallways that had no walls yet, crossing open construction pits on wooden planks. Steel was being rationed for the war, so the engineers built almost the entire structure out of reinforced concrete instead, including the ramps that connect the floors, ramps used instead of stairs so that messengers and equipment carts could move without stopping. The whole thing rests on more than 41,000 concrete pilings driven into the soft ground beside the Potomac. The man supervising the construction for the Army was a Corps of Engineers colonel named Leslie Groves. Remember that name? Within a year, Groves would be pulled off the Pentagon and handed an even bigger secret: command of the Manhattan Project, the program that built the atomic bomb. The same officer who raised the largest office building on Earth went on to build the most destructive weapon in human history. The Pentagon was, in a very real sense, his warm-up. Have you ever wondered why a building designed to run a war was made to look so deliberately dull? There is a reason for that too, and it goes deeper than wartime budgets. So why make it look so plain? Part of it was rationing. There was no steel to spare for decoration, no marble for grand staircases. But part of it was philosophy. This was never meant to impress anyone. It was meant to work. The architects were so convinced the building was a temporary wartime measure that they assumed it would be turned into a records warehouse or a hospital once the war ended. They built it strong enough to hold the crushing weight of endless filing cabinets. That assumption, that it would one day store mountains of paper, led them to over-engineer the structure with extra strength and redundancy they thought no office would ever need. They were wrong about the warehouse, but that mistake would save hundreds of lives 60 years later. Now go inside, past the plain walls, and the building starts to reveal what it actually is. The Pentagon is not really an office building. It is the single nerve center for a military that operates on all 7 continents and every ocean at once. Roughly 23,000 military and civilian employees work here, plus another 3,000 support staff. The Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the commanders who direct the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Space Force all run their part of the machine from inside these 5 rings. And the closer you get to the center, the more the design tells you about power. The E-ring on the outside has the windows and the senior officials, but the real flow of the building is the corridor system. Those 10 spokes that let information and people move between rings in minutes. In a crisis, minutes are everything. A building this size with ordinary hallways would be paralyzed. The Pentagon was designed so that an order conceived in one office can reach the people who execute it before the coffee gets cold. If a building designed to look boring on the outside while running the entire American military from the inside is the kind of hidden in plain sight engineering you find fascinating, take a second to subscribe, because the next part of this story is where the design was tested in the worst possible way. On the morning of September 11, 2001, exactly 60 years to the day after construction began, that over-engineering stopped being a historical footnote and became the reason people lived. At 9:37 in the morning, hijackers flew American Airlines Flight 77 into the western face of the building at around 530 miles per hour. The aircraft weighed more than 90 tons and was still carrying most of its fuel. It struck the first floor, sliced through the structure at a sharp angle, and erupted into a fireball. 125 people inside the Pentagon were killed, along with all 64 people aboard the plane. 189 lives lost in a matter of seconds. It was a catastrophe, and it should have been far worse. Here is what almost no one outside the engineering world knows. At the moment of impact, the Pentagon was in the middle of a massive renovation that had begun in 1998, working through the building one wedge at a time. Flight 77 hit Wedge 1, the one section that had just been reinforced. During that renovation, engineers installed steel beams running floor to ceiling to brace the structure, blast-resistant windows 1.5 inches thick weighing 500 pounds each, and Kevlar panels between the windows to catch flying fragments. The wedge next door, Wedge 2, had been mostly cleared out in preparation for its own renovation. The plane hit the strongest, least occupied part of the entire building. The reinforced section absorbed the blast, the columns held, and the spiral rebar inside those original 1940s concrete columns, a construction choice made for a warehouse that was never built, let the floors above the impact stand for roughly 35 minutes before collapsing, long enough for survivors to escape. A retired Marine colonel could not have scripted a more punishing test, and the building passed it. Had the plane struck a fully occupied, unreinforced wedge a few hundred yards to either side, the death toll could have run into the thousands. The Pentagon was open for business the next day. Step back now and look at the whole thing again, because the Pentagon makes a different kind of sense once you understand what it really is. From the outside, 5 flat walls, no tower, no monument, the dullest skin a government ever wrapped around a building. From the inside, the command center of a military with a budget larger than the next several nations combined, a structure built in 16 months by 15,000 workers under wartime floodlights, raised by the same officer who went on to build the atomic bomb, and engineered so robustly for a warehouse that never existed that it shielded its people from a direct hit by an airliner. That is the secret the plane walls keep. The Pentagon was never trying to look powerful. The power is all on the inside, in the 17.5 miles of corridors that move people in minutes, in the concentric rings that put the decision makers where they can be reached, in the concrete that was poured stronger than anyone thought it needed to be. The building does not announce itself the way a monument does. It does not need to. And it is still doing the job it was built for. More than 80 years after those first employees crossed wooden planks over open construction pits, 25,000 people still walk those corridors every day, running a military that never sleeps. The clocks, an estimated 4,200 of them throughout the building, never stop. Somewhere inside those 5 rings, at every hour, someone is making a decision that will move ships and aircraft on the far side of the planet. So the next time you see that flat, gray, 5-sided shape in a photograph and think it looks like the most boring building in America, remember what is actually behind those walls. The largest office building on Earth. The nerve center of the most powerful military in history. A fortress disguised as a filing cabinet. It was built to be overlooked. And that, more than anything, is the most deliberate thing about it. What do you think the architects of 1941 would say if they could see their temporary wartime warehouse still running the world's most powerful military more than 80 years later?